down, bullies, blow the man down.
To me way, blow the man down.
Blow the man down, bullies.
This is the small bearing. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to press it on. It's going right on, no problem. Beautiful. That was easy. This bearing I put on is the one that was on the tailstock, part of the live center. Now it has this cap that has to go on. Now there are other ways of doing this if you're doing a similar job and you don't happen to have a hydraulic press. And one of the ways of doing that would be to take this shaft here for the tailstock and put it in your freezer and just let it get nice and cold. Let it get frozen. In the meantime, you take that cap, you heat it up with a heat gun, not a torch, just a heat gun. And when you pull this shaft out of the freezer, it'll be the metal will be contracted, it'll be shrunk a little bit, and this cap will be swollen up a little bit because it'll expand with the heat, and it should just drop right on, maybe with a couple of little taps with a wooden mallet. Alright, went right in. There it is. I got the new bearing on, live center, cap is on. So this is ready to go back in the tailstock. Now I just have to put the other bearings on the main spindle. Right now I'm putting on the big bearing, that goes on first. We'll see how well this bearing goes. Keep my eye on it right here. The shoulder's right about here. It's got to come up about 3/4 of an inch maybe. And that shaft is going right in, no problem. Once it's seated, you don't want to try to force it any further. You're just going to damage the bearing. Once you feel it seat, you got to call it good. Now it looks like I could have gone just a little bit more. I just wanted to make sure I didn't hurt anything. That's not a problem. I can fix that. There it is. That's perfect. That's exactly where I want it to be. Can't ask for anything more. Alrighty. Now before I can put the other ones on, I had to remember that these caps, these bearing caps, go on, but they're two different size bearings, so you don't want to mess up. This one, the larger one, faces that bearing, and I don't want to put it all the way on yet because if I do, I won't be able to get it back into the lathe. This one is going to be facing out, and the next bearing goes on like that. Okay, I dropped this base section down another notch, got it to fit in there, and let's press that bearing in. Just double check I have the proper orientation of those bearing covers, so I'm good there. And I can go ahead and start putting some pressure on it. Okay, I got pressure on it now. I'm going to pick this up so I can see where that shaft is in relationship to the bearing. You can see the shoulder. Sneak up on it. Good. That's all we need. So the shoulder's right up to the bearing. It's on exactly where it needs to be. Both bearings in position. These bearing covers will go over once the spindle is back in the lathe. So I think we're good to go. I'm now ready to place the headstock spindle into position. And you can see why these bearing retainers or caps had to be loose, because otherwise I wouldn't have enough room to slide the spindle in. And even now it's not real easy with them off. Just give it a little love here. There we go. Okay, so now the bearings are in position. The bearing caps can go into place. They don't do it very easily. You have to work them on, tap them a little bit at a time. But once they're in, I can put the bolts in. Once I get the bolt started, I can draw up on it with that. And what I can do is I can draw in one side, and once that's in position, I can undo these bolts, slide it back to the other one until they're both bearing caps are drawn in tight over the bearings. I was successful at drawing this bearing cap up over the bearing and into place. And now, to give it a little bit of slack so I can catch the threads on the other end, I'm going to back this off a little bit. And then I can draw the bearing cap up on the other end. And then I'll go back and tighten them all up. Yeah, I have the working end of the headstock all tightened up. And I checked to make sure everything was turning freely. And now I just have to tighten up this end, which doesn't seem to be taking too much. It's going along easily. Okay, yep, it turns easily. No problems in turning it. Okay, that's good. No wiggling now, there's no movement at all. Those other bearings had a lot of slop in them. So I've got the brand new bearings on the main drive spindle, and I have the spindle reinstalled, and it turns well, as it should. No play. That's the way it should be. Before I complete the reassembly, I decided I'd replace the switch. The old switch, it's always been a little bit wonky. It sticks a little bit, you know, when you're trying to turn it on or turn it off, it hangs up. So I ordered a brand new switch, although it's not exactly the same. I'm going to mount it right on here. And the problem is the switch body does not fit. Now, width-wise, it's perfect, but the length, it's about, maybe 1/4 of an inch too narrow here, so I need about 1/8 of an inch on each side I have to trim out. If I do that, it should fit just fine. I measured the width out on each side that I want and marked it with a Sharpie. Now I can clean it up with a file. I don't want to have any jagged or sharp edges that's going to cut me. Beautiful. Fits perfect. Now I can locate where the mounting holes are going to go. I can just take my Sharpie, stick it through there, make a dot. Yeah, I think that's going to work out just fine. Now it's just a matter, I got to pull this out again and start wiring it up. I was finally successful at getting this switch mounted. Hooking it up was easy, attaching the wires, no big deal. Drilling the new holes, opening it up, the opening here so that the switch would fit, no big deal. But when I went to screw these in, well, they don't these, the holes are not drilled and tapped in the metal for these screws. The screws just go through and you put washers and nuts on the back side, and it was so tight back there, it was very, very difficult. So I pretty much had to well, play around, experiment until I finally figured out how I would get them in. And so on the back side with the nuts, I put the washers on this little screwdriver, and I just hold on to those washers and put the screwdriver against the end of the screw and then release it until they fell down over the stud while I had this tilted down. And then I stuffed some tissue paper inside this socket with just a little touch of glue so I could hold the nut in place. And then I was able to reach down while holding the screw on this side, reach behind there and start threading the nut on. Once I got it caught, I was able to finally do the same thing on this side, but it took a considerable amount of time. Well, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. But it works. You know, the switch doesn't hang up. The other switch used to. You'd press it and then you wouldn't be able to get it come back. But this one does work, and I checked it electrically with an ohm meter to make sure it was operating properly, and it does. So I'm happy with this. Now I can start reassembling the lathe. Got it all back together. So here's the moment of truth. Let's see if it should start. There was nothing wrong with the motor when I took it apart. Oh, nice. Nowhere near the vibration it used to have. The work is spinning right where it should be. Before it was really loose and wonky. It was too dangerous. You'd be too scared to do anything with it. Yep. I have no play here. There used to be a lot of slop in here. There was slop here. That's good. Well, it looks like I'll be able to use this lathe again just in time, because I'm going to have to make a bunch of Christmas ornaments pretty soon. Every year people expect me to crank out a bunch of them. So let's see. I'm going to take the first cut since I've rebuilt it. A couple of gouges here. See how it goes. I haven't done any lathe work in over a couple of years now, so I'm a bit rusty. I'm just working at getting this rounded off, because I started with a kind of a rectangular piece in cross section, and I want it to be round. This is generally how I start my tool handles when I make tool. I'm always needing tool handles, so it's kind of how I start making them. I'm not getting any chatter, you know. Those bearings are nice and smooth. Yeah, it's getting there. Nice. I just ran a little sandpaper on it. This is just a piece of soft kiln dried spruce. It was a piece of a 2x4. It was cut down. I just ran some 60 grit over it. And of course you can get much finer if you want to do nice detailed work, but this is just a test coupon. See how this worked out. And I'm pretty satisfied with the rebuild job, because I have absolutely no vibration at either end. It's not moving around, and that used to cause a lot of chatter and cause the tool to dig into the work, and it was terrible. So With those new bearings, it makes a world of difference. And, well, you see, it's nice and round. Worked out nice. Didn't get any chatter. It was beautiful, nice and smooth. All right, I'm going to call this good.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor?